Hello everyone, so today I'll be leading a workshop called Deathly Hallows, and this may be familiar to some of you because Deathly Hallows is from the Harry Potter book series. So, hello Muggles, welcome to Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. This is Harry Potter and I'm currently in my 7th year at Hogwarts. We need your help to defeat the evil He Who Must Not Be Named, as he and his followers have taken over the entire school. The Deathly Hallows, otherwise known as the Resurrection Stone, Invisibility Cloak, and the Elder Wand, are what we need to save Hogwarts. So it's Hermione here. Now that Harry has told you what we need to be done, I'll be providing some starter code for you to get started on coding our Deathly Hallows game. I'll walk you through what I've got, and perhaps you can complete some of our behind the workshop questions to enhance our game and play it with your friends. Let's apparate to the room of requirement. So before we go anywhere, let's clarify some rules. Just in case you Muggleborns aren't familiar with our Stone Cloak Wand game, otherwise known as the Deathly Hallows game, it is the same as the rock, paper, scissors game played in the Muggle world. So rock corresponds to stone, paper corresponds to cloak, meanwhile scissors correspond to wands. So here is a high-level overview of the game. On the top right-hand corner, you can see a GIF that asks for your name and also the opponent from Harry Potter world that you want to play with. And afterwards, it'll start the game and you will be entering either stone, cloak, or wands for your choice selection. But something to keep in mind is, what if we misspell stone, cloak, or wands? Or what if we put something else other than that as the input? Will the program still run? Let's look at this example on the bottom right-hand corner. So, as before, I enter my name and the opponent I want to play with. However, this time, I accidentally put in the word wand, W-A-N, without the D. So, since I didn't put in wand, it's going to ask me to enter stone, cloak, or wand again. And once I enter in one of those three selections, then it will tell me if I won the game or not. So now import the assignment to a new REPL. Go to stemleaks/deathly-hallows. So let's navigate here. Go to new REPL, import from GitHub, and enter in the repo. Awesome. So let's also configure our run button. Cool. Now let's give this game a shot. Let's press the run button. Okay, what's your name? All right, so my turn to pick a selection. Say I pick cloak. Oh, well, it's a tie. So if you want to play again, you have to press the run. So let's pick wand this time. Oh, it's a tie again. So you can see that this game is played only one time. So we're going to have some cool behind the workshop questions for you to better enhance this game. So let's go back and review some things before we dissect the code that we have. So remember that you have to import the random module to use the randint function. The randint method returns an integer number from the specified range. So if we had randint 1, 3, then it will output a random number from 1 to 3 inclusive. So that means 1, 2, 3. and it uses that to pick the stone, cloak, or wand for the opponent. So as you can see on the left-hand side, that player value is set equal to randint 1, 3. So each time the program is run, it will pick a random value from 1 to 3, and from that random value, it will be able to pick the player's choice. So if the player value is 1, then the player's choice is going to be stone. However, if it's 2, it's going to be cloak, and if it's 3, it's going to be wand. So another thing to also keep in mind is to remember to use input to get the user's input from the command line. So as you can see on the left side, we ask for the input, what's your name? So when I enter in my name, it's going to store it in the name variable. And then when it asks me, who in the Harry Potter world do you want to be your opponent, and I put in Ron, then player is going to correspond to Ron. Now let's give a little review on if, elif, and else statements, since we'll be using these statements in the game to compare the input of the opponent and the user. So remember, the if-else statements goes like this. If something is true, then do this. Else, or otherwise, do this. So only one of these statements can be true. If the if statement is not true, then it will execute the else. If the if statement is true, then it will execute the if statement and it will leave the else alone. So what if we have multiple if statements? If we have multiple if statements, your code will go through all of the statements no matter if one is false or not. So for the first if statement, where we have number 1, if this statement is false, it won't execute that branch. However, it will go to the next if statement, and if this if statement is true, then it will execute that branch. And then after it executes that branch, it will still go to the next if statement, which is the number 3 line. And if this number 3 if statement is false, it won't execute it. But if it's true, it'll execute whatever's in that branch. So now let's also review the if, elif, and else statement. So the if, elif, and else statements goes through each branch until one is true. Then it executes that and leaves the other branches below alone. So let's say, for example, that the first if statement is false. So if that's false, then we still have to go down to the elif. So if the elif is true, then we execute what's in the elif branch, but not in the else. We just leave the else alone. But if the if and elif are both false, then it will print the else statement, and that's it. Let's also review while loops. So while loops go until the condition for the while is not true. But while the condition inside for the while is true, it will execute whatever is in the while loop. Let's also review some for loops. So remember, for loops run for a certain amount of times, and it will depend on the number that you give it. So if I say for I in range 3, then it will execute this for loop 3 times. It will execute whatever's inside the for loop 3 times. Now let's go take a peek at the code now that we have had our little review. So as you can see in line 4, we are importing the randint in order to use this random function when we want to generate the opponent's selection. So at first we print out an introduction, and then we ask for the user's name. And then we also want to ask for the opponent's name as well, so we can print a little intro for the user. And then what we want to do is declare some variables that we'll be using later on in this game. So we'll be generating the opponent's choice. So the randint will give us a value of 1, 2, or 3 for player value. And depending on that value, the opponent will be picking stone, cloak, or wands. So now that we scroll down, we can see that the user's choice is going to be asked in an input format. So whatever the user chooses, either stone, cloak, or wand, is going to be put into the user choice variable. So the reason why we want to make the user's choice all lowercase is because we want to make the comparison non-case sensitive. So because you might type in something like ST and then lowercase o and then big case N and lowercase e. And this string is going to be different from if it's just stone, that's all lowercase. And same thing for cloak and wand. So we do this because we want to compare these values and we don't want the case sensitivity to get in the way. So this while loop is validating the user's input right here. So all that it's saying is if the user's choice is not stone, cloak, or wand, then we're going to keep asking for them to enter in one of those. And it'll also lowercase the user's choice. But if the first time around they enter stone, cloak, or wand, we won't have to go into this while loop. The while loop says that only if the user's choice is not one of these three, then it will keep executing what's inside. However, if it answers it correctly, then it'll stop asking it to enter one of these three. So now we print out what the player chose from the random int function and also what you chose, the user. So now we go in here and we see that so we want to make some conditions where there will be a tie. So in rock, paper, scissors, or in this case, stone, cloak, wand, if the player's choice and the user's choice are the same, then that's a tie. So player's choice equals stone and user choice equals stone. And then there are the other two with cloak and wand. If that's the case, then the game result that you print at the end is going to be it's a tie. So some scenarios that we also want to cover is the scenarios where the user will win. So remember that in rock, paper, scissors, rock always beats the scissor and scissor always beats the paper. And then also the paper is always going to beat the rock. So these are the cases where the user will win. So let's just look at one of them. So if the user has cloak, cloak is equivalent to paper, and the player's choice, stone, is going to be rock. So in this case, the user's choice will be winning because rock is going to be defeated by the paper. So these are the other cases that are present when the user will win. And then it will be the opposite for when the player will win. And the player is going to be the opponent. So when the player's choice is stone, which is rock, and the user's choice is wand, which is scissor, then the stone beats the wand. So that is when the opponent will win. And so then it will display the results for the player. Since this game only goes for one round and ends right away, we want to make this more enhanced and maybe have it so that while a user still wants to play, they can keep going for more rounds. So that's a hint to use the while loop. Remember to make sure that the user's input is not case sensitive, so that in that way you can make sure to compare your strings the right way. So we can have something to ask the player, do you want to play this game again? And if the player says yes or no, then we will either continue the game or end the game. So in this case, if you see in the skiff code, it keeps asking the user if it wants to play after each round. And if they say they still want to play, then it continues the game for another round. However, if they say no, then it's going to say game over. And also you want to keep in mind, how are we going to put all this code into a while, right? You only want to keep going while the user still wants to play. So what kind of data type can you use to keep track of that, right? Another challenge is to maybe ask the user how many rounds they want to play initially. So if we add another statement here asking a user, hey, how many times do you want to play? Then maybe we can use that variable in the code later on to be able to execute the code's game however many times that they want to play. So also keeping tally of how many rounds each player wins and ends the game at the last round is something to enhance the game better. For example, maybe you want to try to ask the user how many rounds they want to play and code the game so that it only plays that many times until game is over. So that's really similar to using a for loop. And also keeping tally of someone's points, maybe you can have a counter, right? So if we have something like player count equals 0, and then also have opponent count equal 0. And then each time in this loop that we run to run the game, if the player wins, then we're going to add 1 to the player count. So we're going to say player count plus equals 1. That way it increments the points that the player has. However, if the opponent wins, then we're going to say increment their amount of points down here so that it can increment their score. But if it's a tie, we won't be doing anything to the scoreboard because if it's a tie, no one gets the points. So lastly, I just want to say, challenge yourself with reformatting and refactoring your code. Be creative with how you want to structure your game. If you want to use a while loop to make it a choice for the user to say if they want to keep playing or not, or if you want to use a for loop to designate how many times exactly you want to play this game. And be creative and good luck with the project developer. See you next time.